Honorable Justice Kanan, Janab Qureshi Saab, my friend, colleague at the bar and Member of Parliament, Mr. Tiwari, my dear friend and firebrand lawyer, Deepak, Honorable Judges of the High Court, my dear friend, the Additional Solicitor General of India, and senior advocates, friends, ladies, gentlemen. I wish I went last in this conversation because I'd had the benefit of what others would say, and particularly what I think Mr. Tiwari and my friend Deepak would say. But unfortunately, people want to be, of course, first. I wanted to be last today. I have not given that status, but I'll make do with what I can. I stand before you from a very unique perspective because unfortunately the debate about Uniform Civil Code has been unfortunately brought to the level of a discourse between Hindus and Muslims, majority and minority, whether you should or you should not have it. Is the majority imposing itself on the minority? Is the minority entitled to a artificial island of freedom in this country where they can do something beyond what the majority wants? I think that entire debate is misconceived. I stand here not as the majority. I am a Kodava by birth. I don't know whether most of you know that Kodavas are not Hindus by birth. We are Hinduized by virtue of what we accept to be the deity for us. We are Ganesh believers, we are Kaveri believers. Our Kuldevi is Kaveri because we are nature worshippers. We came into this country at the time of Alexander being the pagans of the Middle East, which finds its root in Islam today. In the pre-Islamized Middle East is when my ancestors lived there, and they were therefore tribes who actually, we were mercenary soldiers. We fought for the king who actually paid us money without region, religion, nationality, nothing. Simply fight for somebody who gives you money. And we fought and came along with the so-called invaders, the Alexanders of the world, into this country, but made this country our own. We were Hinduized into Sanatana Dharma. We now believe we converted our own entire scenario of ancestor worship and worshipping nature and gave that Kaveri a mother form of being our Kula Devi and not just a river. Now therefore I don't stand here as majority Hindu to impose on the so-called minority Muslim on what the uniformity should be. Not at all. I stand here myself as a minority. I stand here from a minority but argue and passionately vote for Uniform Civil Code, not because it is a religious symbol, not because it is a religious ethos, not because the majority should have it on the minority, but I fight for it passionately because it predicates itself on number one, equality. It predicates itself on number two, more importantly, dignity and dignity of the individual. And when it comes to dignity of the individual, ladies and gentlemen, most importantly, dignity of the woman. It's dignity of the girl child which Uniform Civil Code brings to the fore. And I do not understand why we should convert that dignity of the woman debate to majority minority. Why do we do that? We do that because people within the majority syndrome also do not want to give dignity to that girl child. And therefore find methodologies by which the debate becomes a little more sharper if I can bring a minority angle into it. And therefore, Janab Qureshi Saab, I would beg to disagree with you, saying that there is a scenario of the majority imposition on the minority. I would beg to disagree with you that polygamy is not the issue or polygamy is the issue. In fact, it is not even the subject matter of the debate. It's not because a Hindu gentleman can have 4 wives or not, that a Hindu or a Muslim gentleman will have 4 wives or not. Absolutely not. Bigamy is not even the issue in a Uniform Civil Code situation. The issue is how do we bring in an egalitarian set of regulatory system in this country where every individual will have his or her own dignity protected and predicate his or her own life on that pedestal of dignity. How do we give the girl child in this country, which the Mother India's 2 hands, one is male and one is female. We have 50% women in this country, maybe a little less, little more, give or take. How do we make sure that our women get equal treatment irrespective of religion? The only way we can do that is to have Uniform Civil Code. And I'll say why. I am simply coming from the perspective of a constitution. If constitution has told us that yes, India that is Bharat, thankfully your book is so, India that is Bharat shall be a union of states, and it says that I give to every individual, we ourselves have given up to individual, the scenario, the collective scenario of fraternity, and that fraternity is actually predicated on dignity, and that's what the preamble of the constitution says. But along with fraternity and dignity, it is also linked to unity of the country. And therefore, if we have to live in this country, in terms of a constitutional scenario of one country, there has to be a scenario where there is uniformity of the treatment of the laws when it comes to aspects outside the domain of my faith. And that brings me to Article 25, which is freedom to practice, profess and propagate religion. Let's be very clear. 25 gives the right not just to practice your own religion. You can profess your religion, you can propagate your religion. Go ahead and propagate it, do what you want. Make sure that more people accept your religion. Whoever is lucky will have more. But that compared to a scenario of fraternity and Article 44, let's not just brush away 44 saying, oh, it's a directive principles of state policy, it cannot be enforced. Nobody is looking at filing a writ petition in a court and asking one of our honorable judges saying, please issue a writ of mandamus saying we should have a uniform civil code. Unfortunately, despite from 1985, the Supreme Court repeatedly 17 times indicating to the government, and not just the government of the day, multiple governments even previously, right, left, center, coalition, all of them, all politicians have the same hue. Unfortunately, none of the governments have worked on repeated nudges by the Supreme Court, and the latest being by, I think, Justice Pratibha Singh in the Delhi High Court in 2022, saying that please, for heaven's sake, how many times should the parliament be requested, government be told that we need to have a uniform civil code? Now, why did that come in? Please look at the arguments against it. Every time a uniform civil code argument comes in, the first argument, and I'm glad Janab Qureshi Sahab brought it up. Oh, how many of you have seen the draft of the uniform civil code? What are you debating? I'm sorry, that's a wrong question. We are here today to debate and develop a discourse, and a discourse which is amongst intelligent people, amongst adults. The discourse is to say what should be in the uniform civil code. Not to have a debate once the uniform civil code is drafted on saying, oh, how do I defend it? So please appreciate the fact that the intelligentsia in India is coming forward to debate it even before the draft is ready, which means the egalitarian spectrum of what should be and should not be in the uniform civil code is the most important thing. And the counter to it is, no, why should we? It's not even necessary. I ask all those people who say uniform civil code is not necessary, have you read the draft? Do you know what is there in it? How do you say it is unnecessary when you have not even read it? Second, people say that, all right, religion is a matter of faith. Faith is actually intrinsic to the individual. The Constitution of India is not built on collective group rights. It is built on individual rights. And therefore, please give that freedom to the individual. Religion is his domain. And Justice Kannan brought it out, saying that very secularism coming in when it comes to personal laws. There is a fine difference in it. And let me peel that onion. No doubt our constitution actually is predicated on individual rights. Although we may believe that as India we are one, in diversity there is unity, and collectively 5 fingers are better than, as a hand is better than the collective of 5 fingers, the hand is actually more powerful. All that is fine in terms of philosophy. The constitution is rightly, yes, it is based on individual rights. But when it comes to Article 25 in terms of right, the freedom to practice, profess and propagate religion, that is in the domain of faith of a person. So therefore, please go ahead, be a Hindu, be a Christian, be a Sikh, be a Jaina, be a Kodava, don't be whatever, be an atheist. You're free to. That's the domain of faith. But when your manifestations of that faith take color in terms of your activities to another individual, towards another human being, towards another animal, Constitution comes into play. Because that's the theory of social contract. We have contracted ourselves to form a civilization, form a government and go forward, form a country and go forward. So therefore you may be whatever religion, therefore the manifestation of that belief within yourself is a domain of faith, and Article 25 gives you complete freedom, go ahead. But the minute that manifestation touches upon another person, it is the secular activity of that individual which comes into play. So you can't say that the secular activity of a Hindu is different from a secular activity of a Muslim or a Christian. That is anathema. That sentence itself will not make sense. Now, why do I say it's secular activity? The treatment that I give to my daughter is not a religious activity. The treatment I give to my wife is not a religious activity. The treatment, unfortunately or fortunately, a Muslim man gives to his second wife is not a religious activity in this country. It is a secular activity of this country, and the Constitution has every reason to control that activity, because that is when we will form ourselves into a constitutional democracy. Therefore, it's not about whether I can have 4 wives. Gladly I would say I would, but that's not the case. The case is that why should I, that second wife, please look at it from the perspective of the wife. Why should that human being be the second spouse to this man, why? Would you tolerate if that second spouse had another husband? Logically, no. The logical sequitur is no. If it is no, then whether this male is Hindu, Christian, Muslim does not matter. You are not predicating your treatment to another individual on the pedestal of dignity. You are not providing that second wife the dignity that you can give the first wife. And whatever the Quran or the Gita might say, I am sorry, from a perspective of dignity, two people cannot actually have the same pedestal of dignity, one being the first wife and the second wife. It's just not possible. Now I come to the situation of personal autonomy. Arguments given against Uniform Civil Code is again going back to a scenario of personal autonomy. Let it be. Let people practice and profess their religion. Let them treat what they will in terms of their monies, their treatments, their succession, their marriages, etc. on their own. Don't we Hindus have different forms of marriage? I come back to my Kodava days. I had a Hindu marriage, of course. I married another person who also was a Hindu. But my Hindu marriage did not have Saptapati. I did not have fire. I did not walk around the fire 7 times. There were no Vedas chanted in my marriage. Because in the Hindu Marriage Act, customary practices of the Kodavas, where we actually light a lamp and the 2 eldest members of the family sit down and solemnize the marriage in absentia. Have you ever heard of a Hindu marriage in absentia? When I got married, I was in my house in a different town and my wife was in her house in a different town. But our marriage was solemnized by the elders of the family in front of a lamp. And that Hindu marriage in absentia is recognized today to be a formal marriage. Now, therefore, can I turn up and say, all right, why should we have this egalitarianism? Why are you expecting me once a Uniform Civil Code comes that I should sit down and have the fire and 7 rounds? Not at all. Uniform Civil Code is not about unifying practices, customary practices and rituals that you will practice. Absolutely not. Uniform Civil Code is beyond that onion. It is a scenario saying, come what may, whatever practices you will practice, once you are married, you will have a treatment in terms of your spouse, your children, your succession, your secular activities in terms of what impacts society, uniformly apply to everybody. I can't think of one argument intellectually against it. The argument is personal autonomy. Now let me give you an example of how personal autonomy is a double-edged sword and how it is used actually conveniently. Recently in the hijab matter in Karnataka, I was again, I'm nobody in terms of fighting for or against hijab. There was a brief which came in, I looked at the brief. What was the fight? The fight is that there is an educational institution which is imparting education. Part of the funds come from the state. Secular education is being imparted. Veda is not being taught, nor is the Quran being taught there, nor the Bible. It was not a catechism class, or it was not a madrasa, nor was it a Veda Patashala. It was secular education. In a minute, sir, in the secular education scenario, the domain was that if you are coming to a place where state funds are used for secular education, you will not actually wear a religious symbol. For which the argument was, no, you are now getting into the personal autonomy of the woman. It is the personal autonomy of the woman to actually wear a hijab, so let them decide. But when it comes to Uniform Civil Code, the argument of personal autonomy of the woman is not brought in. In every seminar that I have seen in the neighboring state of Kerala, where people have actually had discourses and debated against Uniform Civil Code, not a single female participates. It is the men who take a decision saying, no personal autonomy of the woman, let them not decide. We decide that there is no egalitarianism, we decide it is not predicated on dignity. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I don't think this debate should actually go in terms of majority-minority. Nor should this debate come up saying, oh, what will happen to Hindu undivided family? Nothing will happen to it. What will happen to the tax status? Nothing will happen to it. The scenario is, can we have a bottom common denominator, not even higher morality, a bottom common denominator, uniform set of rules that applies to all citizens of this country? If anybody says no, then I don't think that there is a scenario of constitutionalism. Thank you very much.